Jim Davis, a divorced contractor, passed away at his home in Los Angeles on April 2, 2006, from a heart attack. On the same day, he was put to rest in a close-knit ceremony attended by 2 close family members in addition to workers from the mortuary. Following the burial ceremony held at Steward-Pearce Mortuary, his body was laid to rest in a cemetery in the city of Los Angeles. The people who were responsible for paying Jim Davis's funeral expenses were given the guise that his send-off was quite the event. They were informed that Davis was put to rest after being placed in an elegant, top-of-the-line coffin that was adorned with intricate flower arrangements on the inside. Nearly $31,000 was spent burying Davis at the cemetery that was bordered by palm trees. However, there was a problem. Jim Davis was not from this world. In fact, he didn't exist at all. He was a fictitious character made up by scammers to get money from the insurance people. They didn't even try to make it real. The casket that was placed in the grave was made out of inexpensive plywood and was made heavy by putting rocks or meat and animal bones inside it. This was done, as far as we could tell, to trick the people who handled the casket into thinking there was a corpse inside. The story is shocking, true, and certainly creative. So relax. This really might hit you hard. Federal prosecutors in Los Angeles accused 2 women in April 2009 of defrauding insurance and loan firms by purchasing policies for made-up people, then faking their deaths on paper and arranging their funerals thereafter. 67-year-old Jean Crump, who wrote death certificates for a mortuary in Linwood that is no longer in business, and Faye Schilling, a nurse phlebotomist and grandmother who was 61 years old, were the masterminds behind the life insurance scam operations. According to the investigators, Crump and Schilling's deception goes far further than that. The 2 also forged the death certificates of other people. Among their fake certificates, one of them was a lady who passed away in Arkansas in 2004 from a condition known as cardiorespiratory arrest. But they faked her funeral, cremated an empty coffin, and then reimbursed their expenses, which they didn't actually incur. According to the police, Schilling and Crump allegedly committed fraud against multiple insurance firms, which resulted in them receiving more than $40,000 to fund the costs of Davis's burial. A bill was presented for a funeral coach, a limo, a casket, a funeral program, dressing and casketing, and a fee for refrigeration. It wasn't just them. Lydia Eileen Pierce, who was one of the proprietors of the Steward-Pearce Mortuary, and notary Barbara Ann Lynn were both participants in the Davis con as well. Both women pleaded guilty to the elaborate scheme that began on April 4, 2006, when a woman claiming to be Davis's niece notified the insurance companies of Davis's death and her plan to collect on 4 life insurance policies, totaling $1.25 million. Prosecutors say the scheme began when the woman notified the insurance companies of Davis's death and her plan to collect on these policies. In January of 2006, Davis's niece, who, according to the prosecution, was an imposter who participated in the scam together with Schilling and Crump and later testified against them, became the major beneficiary of Davis's estate. So, if they were all doing everything right and by the book, how did the police get to them? Who broke the news on it? Well, in order to investigate into the claims, one of the insurance firms hired the services of a private investigator. The private investigator made the mandatory call to the physician who was named on the death certificate, which is a requirement under California law. Prosecutors said that Crump used the identity of a legitimate doctor so that he could avoid arousing any suspicion in the event that a life insurance company decided to verify the name. After knowing that an inquiry was being conducted, Crump and Schilling unearthed Davis's supposed corpse to cover their involvement in the killing. Crump and Schilling added a notation to the death certificate stating that the corpse had been burned and that the ashes had been dispersed at sea. The notation was created by Crump. A mannequin, animal bones, and other food items were placed inside the coffin by Schilling and Crump before the corpse was sent to the cremation to be burned. They placed some burnable stuff in the coffin to have good enough weight so that the staff of the crematorium would not get suspicious. As the word got around of their work, the FBI got involved, but they didn't find out about the deception until the doctor, Merlin G. Williams, contacted them and consented to record his interactions with Crump and Schilling while wearing a covert camera. Williams, a general practitioner and radiologist, was working with the FBI at the time because he had a run-in with the authorities for illegally prescribing 16.6 grams of oxycodone. On May 7, 2010, Williams entered a guilty plea, and as a result, he is no longer authorized to practice medicine in the state of California. According to the Medical Board of California, he is in overdue status for his license. On July 10, 2006, Williams is said to have first come into contact with Schilling while dining at a restaurant in Inglewood. He confirmed her involvement in the plan and promised Williams a payment of $50,000 for each life insurance policy in return for the preparation of fraudulent death certificates and medical paperwork. Williams continued to meet Schilling alongside Crump on later occasions, at which time the three of them discussed another con involving long-lasting medical equipment. On April 8, 2009, both Crump and Schilling were taken into custody. Schilling, who was working as a nurse phlebotomist at the time, pleaded with a judge in a sentencing letter that she should not be sent to jail. The letter was shared with the court. She said that after the con, she assisted a repeat offender in getting a job and turning his life around. She said in her letter, "I can only hope that others will allow chances to assist people and not harm them," despite the fact that she was aware that granting him that opportunity contributed to the improvement of society. "I have high hopes of continuing to be of service to others and bringing a fresh perspective to our community." But the judge was unmoved. On the 12th of January, the court handed down Schilling's sentence, which included a federal jail term of 2 years and an order to make restitution in the amount of $300,000. They did commit a crime, but it was certainly a creative one. In the case of Jim Davis, the prosecution claimed that they were responsible for persuading 2 insurance firms to issue policies on his life with a combined value of $700,000. It is also claimed that the suspect gave $50,000 to a physician to have the physician fabricate the suspect's medical history. Prosecutors claim that after Davis was alleged to have died, the scammers convinced 2 firms to pay the upfront expenses of funerals in return for a fee and reimbursement later to cover funeral charges that were drastically exaggerated. This case certainly took many people working in the funeral business by surprise. Jessica Koth, a spokesman for the National Funeral Directors Association, said that she had never heard of a complete hoax funeral, despite the fact that there are periodic reports of scams involving funeral workers stealing from trust funds. Koth said that while she had heard of individual workers stealing from trust funds, she had never heard of an entire fake funeral. Bernadette Palumbo, a professor at Louisiana State University who authored a report on the rise of fraud in the funeral business, said that she too had never heard of such an extensive plot in all her years of working in the field. On the other hand, they are not the only people living in the cellars that are hiding on the shady side of the moral cosmos. There are several others who have either been found guilty or have had different forms of legal closure. Bridget Buckner was sentenced to 10 years in state jail for collecting life insurance money by falsely claiming that both she and her husband, as well as her kid, had passed away. The life insurance coverage for the Chicago resident came from her place of employment, Hallmark Services. First, she said that her preschooler, Bria J., had later passed away as the result of an illness. However, the child had already passed away some 4 years before. Buckner submitted a fraudulent death certificate to her insurance company in order to collect her life insurance payout of $10,000. 5 months later, she reported that her husband had been shot and murdered while serving as an FBI agent in the line of duty. She submitted a death claim for the amount of $15,000. Buckner supplied a precise description to an investigator, stating that her husband had been shot in the lungs and had passed away while they were waiting for surgery. However, the individual who investigated the scam had a background as an FBI agent. Because he would have heard of the husband's passing through the FBI grapevine, he started to become dubious about the situation. Buckner's family did not publish an obituary, and the authorities were unable to secure a cemetery spot for his burial. Her husband had never worked for the FBI and was in good health at the time. The relationship had grown apart, and he was completely oblivious to what was going on. Buckner absconded after posting bail and lived a life as a fugitive until eventually handing herself in. That wasn't nearly as terrible as Kevin Pucia, a preacher from Baltimore. He had a friend who was blind and had developmental disabilities. He killed his friend so that he could collect $1.4 million in life insurance money. He did that because he was in a debt trap and owed tens of thousands of dollars and was in danger of losing his home to foreclosure. So he decided to use his buddy to score some money. Pusha pretended to be Wallace's brother to commit insurance fraud by purchasing 6 life insurance policies using Wallace's identity. Then, to pay the hitman, Pusha stole $50,000 from the bank account belonging to his own church. After being enticed into a public restroom in a park by the assassin, Wallace was discovered dead with several gunshot wounds to the head and back. Investigators found Pusha's day planner with the note, "LW Project Complete." He faces life in prison when sentenced.